we've been going through a text. So we're doing like the last 2 points on it, but I think they all can sort of stand alone on their own, and hopefully be worthwhile. But I like to start our meetings with taking a few minutes to quiet our minds and to bring to mind our motivation for joining the class. And there's lots of reasons we could be here tonight. There's lots of small reasons, I just want to be a calmer, better person. I'm interested in, what Buddhism has to offer, just generally, not even sure maybe if there's going to be any benefit, but with the intention that there'll be some benefit. And then ultimately, the idea is that we're studying or practicing and meditating on Dharma so that we can actually achieve enlightenment and help every living being. So let's just take a few minutes and bring to mind your personal motivation for being here tonight. What would you like to accomplish ultimately? And then, having set our intention, there is this thought that the one thing in this world that can help us is Dharma. And so in trying to study Dharma or doing, again, practicing our meditations, we're looking to achieve all of those goals. And so in a sense, we can say we're going for refuge. And if you haven't been to one of these classes before, or if you're not sure, it's not something that you have to do. I just kind of want to explain that what the idea is here. Refuge means going for help, going for assistance. So when things are difficult, where do we turn? What do we think is going to help us? And so as Buddhists, we go for refuge to Buddha, the one who taught the path, Dharma, the path and the realizations along the path, and then the Sangha, which is the community. It can be thought of as the monks and nuns who are ordained, the teachers who teach, those beings ultimately who have the realizations in their minds. But also we can think of that as the people who are helping us along the path, our Dharma brothers and sisters. So I'm going to just do the refuge prayer. And again, you don't have to do it with me, but just explaining what it is. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, to the positive potential that I create by practicing giving and the other perfections. May I attain the state of a Buddha for the benefit of all beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, through the positive potential that I create by practicing giving and other perfections. May I attain the state of a Buddha for the benefit of all beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, through the positive potential that I create by practicing giving and other perfections. May I attain the state of a Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings. So before we get started, since there is someone who wasn't here last week, I just would like to open it up, not to put you on the spot, but if there's something that you kind of had in mind, or if you have a question or anything any reason, anything that you would like to ask before we start, I'd love to help with that. And so I'll just wait a minute. And again, no pressure, but if there's something that comes to mind, please feel free to chime in.
If you want to speak, just unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Not well, but let me turn up my volume. Yes, hi.
Hi, good to meet you both. Yeah,
Nice to meet you.
thank you. Yeah. Yeah, no, I don't have a particular question right now. I've been studying Buddhism for 20 years, so I'm more of I'm in a lot of cross-cultural sort of mystic traditions right now, and but personally, I am just I'm very ungrounded. I don't have a root under me, and haven't really very much for the last couple of years, and it's become very difficult working with the like a lot of the thoughts of like not serving enough, not being in my potential or my highest bodhisattva role, because I don't have that ground, and so like so much energy has been put to where I'm gonna be next, or kind of root chakra energies instead of serving more masses of people. I am an astrologer and a life and business coach and shamanic healer and many things, musician, and so I'm struggling also with being many things in this incarnation, and how to how to juggle that and be kind and create loving kindness toward myself, but at the same time really like feeling like I'm not sure what I should commit to or where I should commit to, and I tend to have a lot of insights for others, but for myself it's been a struggle lately. So yeah, I've been curious about the sort of the become your own therapist teachings and Lama's teachings about that, and saw this being offered, so I wanted to.
Awesome. Well, seriously, welcome. And this is, I think this is a nice forum because it's informal, right? It's a place where you can ask a question, or, last week, and I think I say a lot of times, we're in the trenches together. Your situation is not unique, right? We're all kind of struggling, to be many things, right? For the most part, we're lay people. So we've got families and jobs and all these other kinds of obligations. And I think the beauty of this path, and particularly like the beauty of the tantric path, but I think the beauty of this path in general is that it's really made for normal people to be able to kind of practice. Having said that, it's so nice to have a community, right? And I think it can be challenging and lonely practicing out there on your own. Just to have people to sort of bounce things off of when you are challenged or like you're feeling stretched. Maybe sometimes just to remind you to be gentle with yourself, which strangely has been kind of a theme for the last few weeks, even as we are grappling with probably one of the most challenging, simple, but really challenging texts in this tradition. So I think you've come, it's great that you're here today. And what's wonderful, Thupten Norbu Ling has so many resources, and they're all on YouTube, and you can go and, just look through and listen to other people's teachings and tap in whenever it kind of works for your schedule. So anyway, all that to say, welcome. I hope there'll be something that will be helpful tonight, but I think just being here, just the energy of making a commitment to, just for one night to come and be with other people who are on the path and who may or may not, but probably do have some of the same struggles that you do, or things similar to that.
What is the text actually?
So let me share it. Well, let me put it in. So it's 8 verses of Lojong, 8 verses for training the mind by Geshe Langri Tangpa. Is that a text you're familiar with?
No.
So it's 8 simple verses. And can I share my screen? Yes.
You can.
I'm just going to start from the top just so you can, and I don't want to say your name in case you don't want people to know your name, but I also can't tell exactly what you would want to be called.
You can say my name. Verdeluz.
Verdeluz. Very
Yeah.
nice to meet you.
Thank you.
So if you can see my screen, can you see it or no? Am I sharing the wrong?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, great. So this is the text, 8 verses for training the mind. And what we've done is I went and I just found 3 different translations because, sometimes there'll be a way of explaining something that, I don't know, just resonates with us more, or perhaps brings something to mind that we didn't think of when we read a different translation. So that's why I've kind of compiled 3 translations. And then I'll just show you kind of what the verses are. And I'm not really going to discuss them, but if you're interested, and I think they're really interesting, feel free to go to YouTube and you can check out the last 2 talks where we kind of went over this. And then I'll also tell you that the first class that we did in this particular series, we did do a Tonglen meditation, and the theme was about being gentle with yourself. So that might be something you want to check out. So feel free to do that. But anyway,
that was in the first class.
that was in the very first class in this series, which was.
And then do you have sorry, Bonnie, do you have this do you have these as like a PDFs maybe that you could send, or
I can certainly turn this into a PDF, and then kind of send that out if you want to put your email in a chat. And then I'm also happy to send you links to the other talks.
that'd be fantastic. Thank you.
You're so totally welcome. And there's tons of resources out there. So these 8 verses are really pith instruction on, basically how to practice, how to make the most out of this life, which is, going back to like be your own therapist. The whole path is like knowing our minds, understanding what our motivation is, and then let me back up. Understanding karma, or having some kind of faith or confidence in karma, and the Buddhist teachings, as well as emptiness. And so from that perspective of trying to develop those 2 things, bodhicitta and the wisdom that understands emptiness, then these verses are kind of helping us traverse the world in a way that's sane, with that being a perspective, right? So in a way you could say, without that, we're kind of like, I don't know, blind architects. We don't know what we're building, but we're building something, with every act of body, speech, and mind, we're planting seeds that are going to ripen and create our world. And so unless we're really mindful about that, we don't know what we're going to get. So these are verses that Geshe Langri Tangpa taught. And these are 3 different verses. And again, I'll just read them for the imprint. And I realize some of them, and maybe I will stop if you have a question, if something really just doesn't go down very smoothly or really seems problematic, or you have questions, happy to answer them. But I'll just read Rinpoche's translation as I just go through to get us to where we are. Determined to obtain the greatest possible benefit from all sentient beings who are more precious than a wish-fulfilling jewel, I shall hold them most dear at all times. Sorry, I'm trying to figure out how to, yeah, okay. When in the company of others, I shall always consider myself the lowest of all, and from the depths of my heart, hold others dear and supreme. So again, I do have to say, like, lowest of all is not about low self-esteem. It's about being open to be able to extract benefit, to be taught in all different situations, regardless of who we're with. Vigilant, the moment a delusion appears in my mind, endangering myself and others, I shall confront and avert it without delay. All right, this one might need mini commentary, but you can go back and listen to the other classes for more discussion. Whenever I see beings who are wicked in nature and overwhelmed by violent negative actions and suffering, I shall hold such rare ones dear as if I had found a precious treasure. And again, I'll just summarize the gist of extended commentary to say, when we're encountering those difficult situations and people who are challenging, it really is an opportunity for us to work on ourselves and look at our own minds. When out of envy, others mistreat me with abuse, insults, or the like, I shall accept defeat and offer the victory to others. When someone whom I've benefited and in whom I have great hopes gives me terrible harm, I shall regard that person as my holy guru. All right, so Verdeluz, you can see that that's actually a lot to bite off. So commentary is really helpful. So feel free to listen to those if these strike you. But also at the end of the class, if there's any questions that you have, I'm more than happy to try my best to answer them. And I'm happy to share my email as well.
Yeah.
So what we're working on today are just the last two verses. And so what I've been doing is kind of trying to go a little bit deeper, talk about each one of these verses, and then do a few minutes to sort of reflect on them and then chat about them. A little bit of kind of commentary, what is meant here, why, and then how do we practice this? So the first translation, I feel funny reading the slides, but I think it's helpful to just hear it. In short, both directly and indirectly, do I offer every happiness and benefit to all my mothers. I shall secretly take upon myself all their harmful actions and suffering. And then the next translation, which is Alex Berzin, slightly different. In short, may I offer to all my mothers, both actually and indirectly, whatever will benefit and bring them joy. And may I hiddenly accept on myself all my mother's troubles and woes. And then lastly, this translation, and now I forgot where I got it. I didn't put the reference. His Holiness, I should have known, sorry. In brief, may I offer benefit and joy to all my mothers, both directly and indirectly. May I quietly take upon myself all hurts and pains of my mothers. So maybe before actually sitting with those for a minute, maybe it's helpful to discuss them a little bit. So this idea of directly and indirectly, offering happiness and benefit to all my mothers. This particular verse, this piece of the verse is actually and indirectly is referring to, obviously, when there's an opportunity to serve others, to do that, and try to make them happy. And there's lots of commentary on boundaries and limitations and, to the best of our capacity and why we don't want to overextend ourselves. So I won't go into that. I won't belabor that now, but to the extent that we are able to happily and stretching ourselves a little bit, but not so much that we'll break, directly doing and giving what will help people, what will make them happy and bring them joy. And then the indirectly piece is referring to a practice called Tonglen, which you may or may not be familiar with, but that's actually a meditation where, so they say it's a giving and taking, but actually it's taking and giving. So what you're doing is first you're contemplating all the various sufferings of an individual. And then I think it's helpful to even do it on yourself. And that's what we did the first class, to develop that self-compassion, because if we can't be compassionate and gentle with ourselves, then we really truly can't do that for others. But the practice of Tonglen, we think about those sufferings, and then we allow ourselves to develop just a strong wish that we could take that suffering away from that person. And then, we want, and the wish also to then make them happy. So of course, it's like if someone's suffering, it's like a child falls down and hurts themselves. You don't give them an ice cream first. First, you take away the suffering. So first is the taking, and then the giving happiness. So the Tonglen meditation is pretty simple, taught in lots of different ways, but essentially it's a practice on your breath. And so the elongated, longer version, you would do this visualization, and then you would bring in all of the suffering and use it to destroy self-cherishing, and your own kind of small mind. And then with your exhalation, you would imagine every happiness that you would be giving that person, up to and including enlightenment. And it's a beautiful meditation. And then briefly, though, it's a practice that you can do just walking down the street, whoever you see, just imagining that you're taking on their suffering, and then giving them every happiness. So every inhalation is removing suffering from other living beings, and every exhalation is giving them happiness. And then it's important to say this idea of, taking the suffering myself doesn't mean like something bad. It's not wishing something bad to happen to us. When we say, especially in this context and in this meditation, when we say myself, it is I would be willing to take on their suffering. But what's very interesting, and in His Holiness the Dalai Lama's commentary on this verse, he mentions Geshe Chekawa, who's another great thought training or mind training Lojong Lama, had been doing all of these prayers to be reborn in the hells so that he could help beings in the hells. And then towards the end, he called his disciples, and he's like, oh, my practices aren't working. And they were worried. And he's like, I'm getting a vision of where I'm going, and it's not the hells. And so the idea there is that, and even to have the wish, the willingness to take upon the suffering really acts as the door to having that happen to us. Like somehow karmically, just that willingness, there's another really famous text, Wheel of Sharp Weapons. And it's a practice to a deity, Yamantaka, or some people say Yamantaka, who is the wrathful manifestation of Manjushri. And in this thing, you're asking, Yamantaka to like come and help destroy the one who causes all my problems, which is self-grasping and self-cherishing. It's not me, it's not self like that. It's the self-grasping and self-cherishing. So we want that to be destroyed because that's the cause, and again, we have to grapple with this. We have to like really see, if you don't think it's the cause, then when don't you think it's the cause? And then, play with it, like really look deeper and deeper. But I think you'll find, I've found across the board, that's always the culprit. When I'm not happy, it is some kind of self-cherishing and self-grasping that's going on. And so at the end of that practice, anyway, all that to say, at the end of the practice, it's cultivating this surety that these are the things that are problematic, and then getting that strong bodhisattva wish, like I must help all living beings. I have to attain enlightenment. I have to help them, and I'd be willing to go to hell, in order to do that. And then in the text, it's really beautiful. Different translations, again, it's like the guards of hell, their weapons become like flowers in the end. Like just when our heart is cultivated to that extent, we wouldn't be able to go to hell if we tried. So that's the idea there. So belaboring all of that to say, because I think it's important to understand two things. One is that the myself who's going to take upon all the suffering, that's not an ordinary state of mind. And it's not an ordinary sense of self. It is these two things that are really our enemies, that look like they're us, that kind of drive so much of what we do, but that actually don't bring us the results that we want, which, like every living being, we want to be happy. So it's important to point out that it's not me taking on the suffering, but it's also important to point out the willingness is important. And so kind of like developing that willingness, even as we know that willingness itself will be the thing that will make it so that it's not possible, right? So that might not be easy. But to just imagine, to just be willing to undergo hardship, which anyone who has taken bodhisattva vows, like that's what we've signed up for, to help all living beings. And up to and including, whatever that hardship would be. And then this idea of hiddenly accepting their troubles and woes, and this goes kind of towards the next verse that we're going to do, but it's just like quietly, not like, oh, I'm a bodhisattva, or I'm a aspiring bodhisattva, or I'm doing Tonglen on you, not that kind of thing. A secret practice, a thing that we do. You look like a normal person, you're walking down the road, and you're just sort of imagining with every inhalation, removing suffering, with every exhalation. You could say blessing them, giving every happiness to all living beings. And that practice is, again, when you think about karma, it starts with that thought. It starts with that practice, but it becomes the stuff from which that ability ends up, happening, actually coming into fruition. So I'm going to pause and hope that there's some discussion, and then maybe we'll sit with it. I'll pause for a couple minutes to see any comments or questions. Is this just stuff you have thought about before or familiar with in some other context?
Yeah, I have a few questions actually.
Please.
Well, I'm about to do a retreat at Tara Mandala in Colorado, and it's a 4 immeasurables retreat.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah.
So is that pretty much the same thing as Tonglen, or?
So 4 immeasurables, you're wishing, may all beings have happiness, may they be free from suffering. It's the end result would be the same, but it's a different practice, right? So, in essence, you could boil down the totality of Buddhism to developing compassion and developing wisdom, right? So in that sense, there with the 4 immeasurables, we're really focusing on, wanting to help all living beings. It is that bodhicitta, that bodhisattva kind of vow, and just how, and that wish, like, let me take responsibility. Lama Zopa Rinpoche's translation of the 4 immeasurables are like, and may I myself alone, right, be the one to actually do this. May all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all beings never be separated from sorrowless bliss. May all beings dwell in equanimity, unaffected by attachment and aversion. And then he's adding to each one of those, and may I myself alone cause them to abide in happiness. May I myself alone cause them to be separated from suffering. It's just adding on that like personal responsibility, that sense of urgency. But so Tonglen is a practice that is totally compatible and with that mind of the 4 immeasurables, right? So I would say, if you want to try doing a Tonglen practice, and there's so many different presentations of that meditation. But I did do one a few weeks ago, where we're, like I said, we were focusing on ourselves. And hi, welcome. And trying to develop that compassion for ourselves. And I stressed it so much then, I don't want to do too much now, but really thinking about it, we are so intimate with our own life's circumstances. We're really truly the only ones we know. Right? I mean, really. And so if we want to develop a mind that has compassion for every living being, and we find ourselves being hard on ourselves,
Yeah.
You know, you have to ask yourself, how can I extend compassion to all of these other beings when I'm unable to do it for myself?
That's the question that I have when you mentioned the Yamantaka practice.
Yes.
Is there like an actual mantra practice or like practice that you can recommend for when the self-grasping and self-cherishing comes in?
So,
and then, like, real quick, part 2 of that is just the way that I'm receiving this is that if I go into like a victimization story, that like that would be the same pretty much as like self-grasping or self-cherishing, and that so but the layer of the victimization story is that it's a sense of not having the capacity to then serve at the greatest level that I would want. So it's actually coming from the bodhicitta.
Yeah. So what you're saying is so on target for like where, as we're practicing, this is where we are. You know, this is the middle way. This is the balance, trying to figure that out, right? And so, and it is a very real balance. So knowing ourselves, I have to know, like, what am I capable of, really? And then try to stretch myself a little and aspire to so much more, you know, which ends up, and I've said this, and even in the last 4 classes of this particular series, you almost feel hypocritical in a way, but it's because our aspirations are so high. You know, perfection is something the world will tell us isn't possible. You know, enlightenment is perfection. It's not something that we can create in a moment. It's not something that we can do instantly. It's like a friend of mine said, it's a marathon. And so I always say it, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And it's not something that we can't jump over where we are. We kind of have to be where we are, but then just gradually trying, knowing what my limitations are. And okay, I'm going to take a minute to just say, if you study karma, there's things that we can do to purify our karma, basically to like, if you think of it as a physical seed, that analogy, it holds up very well. So imagine there's these 4 ways that we can kind of put poison on karmic things that we've done. So we usually apply it to negative things. But conversely, if we do something, so one of the first ones is regret. And I'll just tell you briefly, the way to start to purify an action is first going for refuge, understanding karma and emptiness to the best of our ability. So going for refuge, regretting what we've done, doing some kind of remedial action, you know, makeup kind of thing, and then having some resolution. I always remember them with 4 R's because it's easy for me. Like to resolve for a reasonable, keepable period of time not to do it again. So why is that important? Well, because if I do something that I'm not really capable of doing, I will regret it. And I will damage the seed of the good deed I did. So it's so much better and so powerful to do what we can do happily and really rejoice in that. And then aspire, you know, hang on to that wish, you know, may I, by doing this, you know, this is all I can do happily today. may my ability, may my capacity increase, you know, because we have, you know, this is enlightenment we're going after. So, but this is the place I think where, and I myself am right there along with you, like, oh, I could have done more, I should be doing more, it's not enough. It's a real struggle, but that I think is in some sense the sweet spot. Knowing, you know, kind of pushing ourselves a little bit beyond our comfort zone, but not so much that we're going to break, right? Something that is sustainable. And you know, Master Shantideva, Guide to Bodhisattva's Way of Life, you know, talks about, you know, starting generosity, you know, start with carrots and potatoes, start with some, you know, this is why we offer water, right? So, you know, who knows, because the water situation, and I live in Arizona, so it could change, but, you know, water for most people is something easy to be able to give. It's clean, it's pure, and we can, and the reason we do water offerings, you know, water bowl offerings or light offerings, those are things that we can easily offer and rejoice that we offered them. And then they create, again, talking about how karma works. One of the ways karma ripens is a habit. So you do that little thing and you're actually planting the seed to have a habit and then to have a greater capacity. So I'll stop there. I think that addresses that bit, kind of like the struggle and not feeling like you're doing enough. But I want to pause in case there's something else.
Yeah, that's helpful. I think it was literally today. I was like, I swam and then I got out and I was crying, just like I just want to offer so much. I just want to give so much, and I don't feel like my capacity is, it's hitting where like I know internally I can, but like I need a lot more help to be invited to share at those bigger scales, to serve at those bigger scales. And it feels like I have to do something to do that. And I don't know how to balance between doing and non-doing, you know, and how to not get the ego involved with that. And that's why I'm asking about the Yamantaka practice or mantra.
Yeah. So if you really are feeling like a spiritual warrior, so I said this the last time, and I have done this. So there is a text, it's called Wheel of Sharp Weapons. You can read it. It takes, I don't remember now, maybe 2 hours max. You can just recite it. And that I think is like real medicine for, you know, real medicine for getting that self-cherishing. It's one of the few places where, you know, there's even sort of like strange karmic correlations that are made in that text. You know, when I'm experiencing X, may I remember it's because of Y, you know, basically all the things that I've done, these things that I've done out of self-grasping and self-cherishing. So being in that struggle. So I think when you're really feeling down, I think that's a great text, if you're brave, to kind of help muster your strength and spiritual courage. But I think for the most part, it is just doing these practices. And I guess it's okay to repeat. I'll say, you know, last week I said, gosh, I think if it was one grand gesture was all it took, then I think we've all had those moments where we would be willing, right? We would be willing to take upon some very real kind of suffering if we could do that. But it would be sort of like jumping over where we are. You know, the reality is, it is the everyday kindnesses. It is the moment by moment, hour by hour, understanding what is my motivation for this. You know, as you said before, it could be some ego thing, right? And so constantly checking and really getting to know our mind. This is the be your own therapist. Understand what's making me tick. Why am I doing the things I'm doing? Is this, I think, you know, I've shared examples where I thought I was doing something that was a holy offering. But, you know, later, because certain thoughts manifested in my mind, I had to recognize that while I had a pure motivation, it was all tied up with self-cherishing, with self-grasping, with ego, you know, wanting credit. And so this class, and I think just the Buddhist path in general, is about unwinding and decoupling those things that are virtuous from those things that are not, and getting really clear and clearer in our own minds. And, you know, I had one teacher say to me, and I think, and it hit me as being really in a visceral way as some kind of truth. You know, the fact that we have these amazing teachings, the fact that we have this human body, you know, we say precious human rebirth, this great opportunity that we have is amazing. And what keeps us from full enlightenment, he said, is low level radiation. You know, just the constant little petty small thoughts. And the only way we're going to eliminate those are just that daily practice. And so, not to discourage, you know, the wanting to do something big, to offer in a great, amazing way, but just to know up front that isn't going to do the job. You know, there's still going to be all this, you know, and I guess some people could be discouraged. I'm always kind of encouraged when I meet people who've been practicing for a long time and they share where they are, and they don't seem to be enlightened to me, but they've made some very real progress. And I'm like, okay, I can relate to that. And then from there, I can see where my own mind has changed. And then I can, you know, look at my teachers and how they're manifesting in the world. And then I have confidence. But it's from the very beginning all the way to enlightenment. And so, you know, we can't just hop to the next step. And I think that's challenging, right? That's really hard. Maybe I overspoke about that, but yeah. And that's why, you know, hiddenly, so even this verse, you know, hiddenly accepting all mother's troubles and woes, in secret doing it, you know, it kind of speaks, ironically, it kind of speaks to this whole idea though of, you know, wanting to do the grand gesture. Hey, you know, that I want to, you know, do something that will be recognized. I wish I could remember the teacher, but I heard this story a long time ago, and, you know, I love it so much. There had been a Lama who had been doing a meditation retreat for a long period of time, and his sponsor was coming to visit his cave. And so he had been doing, so this yogi had been doing these very genuine, very sincere practice, working on his mind, and he had made progress on his mind, and that's what he was focused on. And then his sponsor or patron was coming to visit, and he had the thought like, oh my gosh, you know, my altar is a mess. Like I better like put out some beautiful offerings and make everything look really good, because this sponsor's coming and they've been paying for my retreat, and, you know, they're going to think I didn't do anything. And so he goes about, he makes all the beautiful offerings and makes everything lovely. And then, and actually this goes to the next verse, but doesn't matter. And then a light bulb goes off, and he realizes like, wow, that's 8 worldly dharmas. I'm caring about what this person thinks rather than what I'm actually doing. And so then he took a bunch of dirt and just threw it on his altar to make it look all messy and horrible, you know, which normally would be not a good deed, right? But in this case, it was for the right reason. It was like, okay, my ego can't take over the virtuous work that I've done. And then they say his teacher was in another place, and just was suddenly got really happy and said, oh, so-and-so just got a realization, somebody just realized, someone out there just realized 8 worldly dharmas at play. So I think it's like that. So I'll pause again, and a couple other people have joined, and hey, hi.
Sorry, Puja went too long. I apologize.
No, never apologize for Puja. Yay, Puja. Thank you for joining. So, by the way, I love that there's like discussion and questions, because sometimes we just are sometimes I talk too much. I probably talk too much anyway. But I would love to pause again just to see if you have any other questions or comments. Okay. We still have another verse after this. So let's just take 1 minute to kind of sit with this verse, offering the benefit and, offering directly and indirectly happiness to others, and secretly taking upon ourselves all of their problems. Just what that means to you just in this moment. And if you can aspire to practice this to the best of your ability. Okay. So moving along to the next verse. And again, if this is your first time, take whatever seems helpful, and feel free to flush the rest. Maybe like just put it aside to revisit. And all of these verses build upon each other. So the last verse in the text is undefiled by the stains of the superstitions of the 8 worldly concerns. May I, by perceiving all phenomena as illusory, be released from the bondage of attachment. Another translation: through a mind untarnished by stains of conceptions concerning 8 passing things, throughout all of this, and that knows all phenomena as an illusion, may I break free from my bondage without any clinging. And the last translation: may all this remain undefiled by the stains of the 8 mundane concerns, and may I, recognizing all things as illusion, devoid of clinging, be released from bondage. So, wow. Yeah, this is not a 10 or 15 minute discussion for sure. There's so much to unpack in these simple but not simple verses. So, undefiled by stains of the superstitions of the 8 worldly concerns. So here it's 8 worldly concerns, or 8 mundane concerns, or the conceptions concerning 8 passing things. Typically, these are known as 8 worldly dharmas. They are the things that make the world go round. It's what keeps us in samsara. It's what literally makes the cycle, wheel of life, go round and round. It is that typically in terms of like what we want and what we don't want. So, wanting pleasure or happiness, and not wanting, unpleasant things and unhappiness. Wanting gain, not wanting loss. wanting praise, not wanting blame, wanting recognition and fame, and not wanting to have like a bad reputation. So these things, why are they problematic? So let me just say, wanting to be happy in itself, not a problem. Wanting nice things, not a problem. It's when we want them to the extent that we're willing to do something that would be negative, which by the way is all the time, all day long. If we really, really know our mind and we're really looking, it's happening all the time. So catching ourselves like, whoa, and it's not big. If you're in a class like this, we're not doing big, terrible things. It's a subtle negative thought about someone else, maybe, that comes from our desire to like have a good reputation more than that person, like some kind of jealousy, or somebody has, something that we want. Again, it's either that jealousy or kind of begrudging someone, that sense of selfishness. So we're probably not doing, we're probably really not acting on these thoughts very much. We may be, because this thing, like of the non-virtuous things, the doors of body, speech, and mind, the mouth, speech is like, has 4, everything else has 3. So there's more opportunities to do harm by what we say. So, maybe we're saying little subtle things. Why is that a problem? Because we want to attain enlightenment. And little subtle things plant seeds for bigger things, exponential growth, karma. So it's about developing a mind, and just very summarily putting it, that can appreciate when the good things happen, but isn't grasping at them. So it doesn't mean not enjoying. This path is very joyful. I look at the lamas that I love. They all seem to be having a great time. They're joyful people. His Holiness the Dalai Lama laughs all the time. But he also understands the gravity of this world, right? It's both things. So being able to appreciate when good things happen, but not grasping. And then when negative things happen, no, it's not like I want this terrible sickness to come upon me. It's never that thought. It's never about wanting to harm ourselves, but just some kind of gentle acceptance when negative things come, right? When the opposite, when the things that we don't want happen, developing some gentle acceptance, and then some determination to use it. So the other verses, going through them, really, a lot of them are about, how do I use these things to develop myself spiritually? And, we talked about it in previous weeks, but to the extent that we're able to do that, to the extent that I can take something negative and use it to develop myself spiritually, it has qualitatively transformed. So, how do you even speak of that as a negative thing? And I know and I think lots of people on the path can look back at something in their life that happened. Maybe it's the thing that got you on a spiritual path to begin with. Something that happened that wasn't good at the time, but that you were able to use, and you maybe developed greater compassion, or understanding, or love, or commitment to your practice, whatever it is. Taking those negative things that will inevitably happen, because until we're enlightened, we're here in the cycle of suffering. So we are eligible for nasty things to happen. But then when they do, understanding, where they came from. So this goes more to the second part of the verse, by perceiving all phenomena as illusory and being released from the bondage of attachment. So that is a topic that I've spent almost 30 years trying to wrap my head around. This is, how do things exist? Reality. From a Buddhist perspective, we say empty of all inherent nature, existing only by name. I can say the words, but my mind, when phenomena appear, this class, whatever's appearing to me, it appears solid. It appears to be self-existing. It appears to be coming at me, as opposed to my karmic seeds, the causes and conditions coming from me, right? Based upon my actions of body, speech, and mind. It doesn't seem that way. It seems coming this way. So playing with this idea of emptiness, what does it mean all phenomena is illusory? Well, phenomena still exist, but how does it exist, right? Independence, upon other things, ultimately independence upon a name and a label. But we could say, causes and conditions are, our karmic predilection, tongue-tied, our karmic inclinations there. That's where reality is coming from. So then understanding that, and now doing things that say, okay, I'm doing virtue now, not because I want someone to think highly of me. I'm avoiding negative actions, not because I'm keeping my altar nice, not because of what someone is going to think, but because I understand where things come from. I'm making beautiful offerings because I understand that develops a habit of generosity, and ultimately it plants the seeds for me to have resources, right? So a Dharma practitioner is still acting in the world, but not less and less. And I can't say not being run by the 8 worldly dharmas, because if I'm honest, it's here. It's here for me. I can only speak for myself. But I'm getting to know my mind, and then it's healthier, right? Because I'm not doing things, I'm not chasing after the transitory happiness, the transitory pleasure. When pleasure comes, when nice things happen, I totally enjoy them. But I'm not going to be willing to harm, I'm not willing to do negative actions to get those things. I hope it's okay. It looks like it's going to be a little bit over today. But I want to pause for questions about this verse. And again, never going to finish. never to be finished, truly. Please don't be shy if there's thoughts or comments.
Hey, buddy. For me, I thought it was something else. So in the third one, Dalai Lama's recognizing all things as an illusion. What I thought that was that sometimes things may appear to be something.
Mm-hmm.
No, I may think that it's something. I may tell myself that it's something. I may have a story about this thing, but that's not how things appear.
Yes.
It's all reality. That's
Yes.
how I talk.
No, that's absolutely correct. But
The
that
story about Bonnie, the girl who snubbed me at dinner yesterday. She must hate me. She must think that I'm psycho. She just doesn't want to be friends with me. When all reality, Bonnie wasn't snubbing me. She was having a bad day. That's kind of my things that I play in my head.
and that's totally right on. It's degrees and layers. But what you're acknowledging, Shayla, is that it's a story that's coming from me. And that is true in the way that you just said, but it's also true in the ultimate way. It is a label. It is a story. The idea of Bonnie to Bonnie is still a story. I'm elaborating, decorating, making up a story of who I am. Years ago, I was in a class, we were getting, well, it was a tantric class, and we were talking about, how do you do deity practices? How can you visualize yourself like that? And it just occurred to me, Well, probably the same way I visualize myself as I am. I make up a story about it, right? But this one feels real. This is the one that I'm buying into as reality, as truth. But actually, that's how you could become Chenrezig or Tara. You're available to become Chenrezig or Tara because Shayla is empty of an inherent nature of her own. So that, I mean, that is a big, that's why I said it's 25 plus years of grappling with this. But what you said, so however we can touch that idea that phenomena are illusory, from even the things that look like, how could we argue about this piece of paper, whether or not it's a piece of paper? There's some things you could just say, oh, objectively, it's this. But again, that's a much deeper, that's more than we're going to cover in a class. And honestly, it's more than, it's the goal of a lifetime is to see that truth directly. When you hear direct perception of emptiness, like the realization of emptiness, which is not the intellectual understanding, it's something totally different. But why do we talk about it? Because then we're planting seeds to actually have that experience and trying to meditate and grapple. We're not going to get to it intellectually, but we plant the seeds to be able to have that realization. And so they say, and that's why we want to do that, because that cuts, because until we have that realization, things appear so strongly to be existing from their own side. That we can't do the final work of enlightenment until we have seen that. And then even after that, things will still appear self-existent for a while, but now we will have had that, we don't understand, we've realized the truth. We know it's a hallucination. We know that it's a mental construction. But until then, it appears to be coming at us from the external world in a real concrete way. So how you're thinking of it, like it's a story, totally works. Just remember, ultimately, it's a story. There's no Bonnie that can say, because what we want to say is, but what did Bonnie really do? Right? We're always looking for like, what's the thing that's really objectively true? We look at our friends like, what really happened here? There's no objective inherent thing that we can really point to. Anyway, I would like to sit for just 1 minute, if that's okay with this. And then I'm happy to stay on a few minutes after. I would love to share my email if you have questions, and there have been some texts that I've talked about sharing, and I can put all that stuff in the chat after this. But let's just take a minute to think about, again, it's so much, like the Dharma is so rich. We're just touching bits and pieces. But how wonderful to spend the evening together doing this, right? And then let's just dedicate the time that we've spent, because every action of our body, speech, and mind plants a seed. So let's invest the time we just spent to our highest goals. May we become a being who can help every living being and bring them every happiness up to and including enlightenment. And may all of our teachers have long and healthy lives. And may all their holy wishes be completely fulfilled. May all those friends on the path who support us, may they also gain all the realizations of the path. And personally, I'd like to dedicate to the quick return of Lama Zopa Rinpoche. And thank you for the time. I'm sorry I ran a little over. And I'm also sorry that I whizzed through things. So, yeah, thank you, everyone. Thank you for the time.
Been just a complete joy this month, spending every Tuesday with you. It's been incredible. I've enjoyed every second of it. So yes,
Thank you. Thank you so much, Shayla.
And hopefully, well, Venerable Dundrup will be in touch. We got to do this again.